You're listening to Two Vatos Talking, aka TVT Bro Talk, a podcast by two dads discussing life's challenges and blessings with the goal to create a sincere community for men. We're your co-hosts, Eduardo and Spencer.
For many years, my dad would call me mijo, a compound word combining the words me and hijo, or in English, my son. Then at some point in my life, probably as an adult, he started calling me papi. It doesn't make sense in English or American culture for a father to call his son daddy. But in Mexican American culture, it's a sign of endearment. Since my father passed, no one has ever called me papi. It pains me to say that I'll probably never hear anyone call me papi again.
If you visit the Evergreen Cemetery on El Paso's Far East Side, you'll come upon my parents' shared headstone. It reads Margarita Sanchez Natividad, and above her name, Francisco Tachis Natividad. Although his given name was Francisco, we all affectionately called him Tachis. Tachis is a term of endearment that originated from my nephew Frankie, whom my parents raised since he was 6 months old. Although Tachis was his grandpa, he raised him like his son. In almost 9 decades of his life, he was known by many names, including Francisco, Panchito, Kiko, and Apa. But I can confidently say that there will never be another Tachis ever again.
So in episode 1, we talked about our names and places as influential parts of our identities. There are so many people and experiences that make up our identity, but perhaps none bigger than our fathers. Ed, tell me about your dad and how he influenced your identity.
All right, so my father, he was one of 5 boys raised in Chihuahua, Parral by my grandma. My dad was, from what I know, or from what the stories that I would recall from my dad, he would tell me how hard of a life, and he wouldn't really complain about it. He would just kind of say it matter-of-factly, how he would sell water to the coal miners for a peso, and that's how he would just make money while he was a kid. And I'm talking below the age of 10, you know. So he never had a formal education. He was a very, very heavy drinker, as all my uncles were, and it wasn't a fun drink. You know, he was a full-blown alcoholic. And so went to AA. He quit drinking when I was around 15. And so I have vivid memories of him in his drinking phase. And if you talk to my siblings, they all have their own recollections of how he would drink. Anyways, his drinking was a big part of his identity. And after he quit drinking, it affected everything. You know, his relationship with his family, with his brothers. They stopped talking to him. They just wouldn't come over as much, just because, you know, that was their common bond, right? They would just drink. And you know, now as an adult, I look at those formative years growing up where you see people drinking, and I just thought that that's what everybody did. I had a friend over at the house one time, and my dad showed up with like 2 cases of Tecate, right? And it was him and my 2 uncles. And my friend goes, "Man, are you guys going to have a party?" And I'm like, "No, all right? Like, this is just the weekend, right? This is what they're going to do." And my friend's eyes were like in shock. He's like, "That's a lot of beer." And I'm like, "Okay, right?" Like,
It's a Saturday.
It's just another Friday, right? It's another Saturday.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was just like, that's just what I thought everybody's parents did. My mom never drank. And so anyways, he grew up on the streets in Mexico. He worked menial jobs. He worked the cotton fields, picking produce in Denver, and he really just worked really hard. He made a life in Juarez, married my mom. They came to El Paso, lived in the 2nd Ward, where they had a community bathroom, and so it was like an entire wing of, you know, these little apartments or whatever they were, would share one bathroom. And so my mom would just tell him, "You need to get me out of here, right? You need to get me out of here, and you need to get us something." And so my dad, working his jobs, he worked at Fort Bliss for a lot of years as a cook. So he was able to find a little house, and it was literally 3 rooms, not 3 bedrooms, it was 3 rooms. You had the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. And it was a house, it was in a decent neighborhood, and it was like a little palace for my parents, right? And so while my dad worked, my mom stayed home and just took care of the kids. And those kids, those 2 kids turned into 7 kids, right, over the next 11 years or whatnot. And so that house that my parents bought for $5,000
What year was that?
must have been in the 60s sometime.
Right, back when houses were affordable
Yeah, way affordable, right?
for working class families.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and my dad was a cook, right? He was a cook at Fort Bliss, so he wasn't making like a bunch of money. He didn't even have a car. He would take the bus to work every day. But he was able to scrape his money together and buy that little property. And they never even took out a home loan. It was, buy from owner. And so the owner, this lady, she had a bunch of properties, and she made a deal with my parents, and my parents actually went through with it and actually bought the house from her. And so she never thought that was going to happen, because I guess everybody else just kind of does it for a couple years and moves on. But my parents actually went through, paid it off, and then they got the deed to the house. Little did I know that we grew up in a segregated neighborhood in El Paso. Our neighbors were black. A lot of our neighbors were black, and we still own that house in that neighborhood. And there's a black church down right around the corner from our house, and there was like 2 or 3 other black churches. The Douglases, the Hancocks, the Nelsons, these were all my neighbors, because that neighborhood was a dedicated black neighborhood and poor Mexicans. And so we were part of the poor Mexican crowd. So my black neighbors knew Spanish fluently because they hung out with us. And it's just kind of mind-boggling if you think about that now. Anyways, that's a whole other subject. But my parents were really living the American dream. Come to America, work, get a house, have your kids, raise them. And, my dad had very menial funds. He didn't have a rich uncle. He didn't have a family to reach back and get support from.
No silver spoon.
At all, right? If anything, he was the silver spoon to his siblings. He was the one offering help to them to come to America. And so, I always look at that as like, you don't know the language, you have no formal education, you have nothing, no family, no contacts, no network. You just know you know how to work hard, right? And he would tell me, trash never runs out. There will always be trash that you can pick up, and you will always have a job doing that, right? That's where he came from. And to him, I think that was like a level up from like picking produce in the fields, right, for $5 a week or whatever it was. So for him, he always found himself jobs like that. So he was a cook for a lot of years at Fort Bliss, and then he was a janitor at State National Bank in downtown. And then he finally got a job as a janitor at the Fox Fine Art Building at UTEP. And he did that for like 25 years. And so he has a pension from UTEP, and he had health benefits and all that good stuff. So he retired at like 62, 63, something like that. And then he lived all the way to 89. So he really took advantage of that retirement package. So good on him, right? He paid off his house, never had a credit card, never had a car payment, never had any kind of, credit like that. Anything he bought, it was always cash. He was just a cash guy.
He was part of a different generation.
Completely.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to even consider living cash only right now. But anyways.
I don't know if anybody does it anymore. I mean, there's got to be someone out there, but in this country, it's super challenging.
Right. So, yeah, he lived, he spent a lot of time in bars. He was a big pool shark. He really was good at pool. And he knew how to do upholstery. So I don't know where he learned how to do upholstery, but what he would do is he would pick up furniture off the sides of like streets, and then he would bring it home, and it looked terrible, and then he'd go and get the fabric and tear the whole thing apart and then reupholster this couch, and then he would sell it. And he would do this all the time, right? And it was always just a funny story. It was always like, wow, this beautiful couch, and then it's gone. and then we have this crummy old like living room set or whatever, right? And so one time he got this this couch that folded into like a daybed, and he upholstered it with like this black vinyl, right? And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so I was just a kid, and I would like slide on it because it was vinyl, right? Back then we used vinyl a lot. So I would slide on it, and then he's like, "Man, I bet you we could sell this for whatever." And I was just sad, and I was like, "Man, but it's so nice, right?" And it's a bed too. And so I got a pair of scissors from like first grade, and I poked a hole right in the seat of it. And then my parents come back, and they're like, "Oh my God, there's a hole in it," right? And so they're like, "What the hell happened," right? And then
Did you confess?
I fessed up, right? And they're like, "What happened?" And then I'm like, kind of sniffling in the corner, right? And they're like, "What happened?" And I was like, "Well, you sell everything, right?" So I took this pair of scissors and then I poked a hole in it so you won't sell it. And they just looked at each other and they're like, "Holy crap!" And they didn't even get mad at me, right? They were just like, "Okay." So we kept it, and then that hole turned into this giant hole that just spread,
and it never fixed. Never fixed it. Now. So now it was yours, and it became part of the furniture, like the other pieces in the house.
Yeah,
just
my sister.
Great.
My sister reminds me of that, and she goes, "Wow, what kind of character does that say about you? You were willing to just poke a hole and take the risk, but you wanted that furniture." And I was like, "Yeah, because I got tired of seeing all the good stuff leave." Right?
Yeah. Well, there's something interesting there that your dad became the janitor. I knew he was a janitor at UTEP, but I didn't know, if he was assigned to a certain building. But he was assigned to the Fine Arts building,
Right.
and eventually he became an artist.
Oh yeah. There was probably no connection to that.
I think there probably is.
Maybe.
It's just not direct, right? Yeah. And so, the social ladder that you climbed in one generation, right? That's pretty amazing,
Right?
Because sometimes it like you said, you don't not a rich uncle, or you didn't get a trust fund or anything like that, right? It was, as they say, the school of hard knocks, and you saw your dad work really hard, and you think, well, this is what you do. You apply yourself to something, and you just bust your butt.
Well, to that point, I saw my dad working on the house tremendously, right? Like always, and my dad was 100% alcoholic, right? 100% alcoholic. He would drink a lot. Again, he stopped drinking when I was like 15. But in those 15 years of my life, I saw him drink a tremendous amount. But he never called in sick, right? Never called in sick. Always showed up to work, no matter how hungover he was, no matter what. He never ever called in sick.
Yeah.
And in addition, he always worked on the house. He worked on adding something, fixing something, painting something. Might not have been the best way to do something. He always did it the cheap way. Guys from the bars that he would meet, a carpenter, he would bring them home and they would build a closet. You name it, that's how we got things done.
Right.
But we got things done, right? And I use that now because I'm like, well, I could figure out how to do that, right? I mean, and now I call it Father YouTube. I go to YouTube and I just look at how to install a light switch and then I could figure it out, right? But for my dad, he just kind of figured it out with the help of his friends, of my uncles. But he was always working on the house.
Yeah.
And that was the dream, right? He ended up making that 3-room house into a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, 2,000 square feet. And it's amazing that you could take something like a three-room house with no yard, no nothing, into a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's just incredible to me now.
It's kind of a metaphor for, what he accomplishes the American dream.
Sure.
Right? Taking almost nothing and turning it into something.
From nothing.
Yeah.
Right? From nothing.
Well, other than hard work. He
Yeah.
had a work ethic that was instilled in him since he was a child.
Yeah.
Because, hey, we got mouths to feed and you're one of them.
Right.
So you better get out there and bring something in.
And it was maybe a little bit of the work hard, play hard, where he would definitely go out and play hard. He always came home, but he was always out drinking, right? And he was never physically abusive, but there was a lot of like absentee fatherhood where he was around, but he wasn't around. But we always knew who ran the show. If he was around, you don't make a bunch of noise. You don't freaking be running around causing a ruckus. It's just one word out of him, and the whole room quiets down.
Yeah.
So it was just, he was the definition of a macho man when he walks into his house, and my mom would make him food. Didn't matter what time of day or night. She would make him a caldo. She would make him some quesadillas, 2 o'clock in the morning from the bars, 8 a.m., you name it.
Yeah.
And my mom was always there.
But he was the king of the castle. He was the king of the castle.
That is 100% the way it rolled.
Yeah. So some of that reminds me of my father. I don't ever remember my dad calling in sick. In fact, for him, some of the magic words were overtime, double time, holiday pay. Right? If you can get into work under those rules, like you're there. And he was always early. When I say early, not these 10, 15 minutes early, always at least 30 minutes early, but easily an hour early to a lot of things. So my dad, he was born in Houston. He was born in his house, right, in near north side, Houston, Texas. And we talked about in episode 1 our names a little bit. So his dad abandoned him before he was even born. He was supposed to be a Ramirez. His older brother has that last name, or had that last name, Ramirez. And so that always stuck with my dad. It was a very painful thing for him to know that his dad never wanted him, right? And then even lived in the same neighborhood, a couple blocks away. You see each other in certain social situations. And it was always painful for my dad to know that, when your father doesn't love you, doesn't want you, doesn't want to be a part of your life since birth. And then my dad had several half-brothers and sisters. So that was something for him growing up. He would say, friends would ask me, how come your brother's Ramirez and you're Herrera and your sister's Gilchrist and da-da-da-da-da, right?
Yeah.
And so he would tell me, he goes, I knew when you were going to be born that I was going to stick around. I was going to be your dad, right? I was never going to abandon you. Now, did he have a manual on how to be a dad? No, because he never had an example. Because the guy who kind of adopted him, I guess, he never stuck around either. And there's another guy after that that's just, my grandma had a rough life and maybe didn't make the best decisions with some things, like a lot of us do. But he never had a father figure until maybe a little later in life. But by that time, he was a young man. So in high school, my dad was a great storyteller. And so he attended Jeff Davis High School near North Houston, which is now Northside High School. And he told me that the school counselor, had an exit interview with him, and he was a senior. This is like 67. And she said, hey, Wally, so what are your plans? What do you want to do when you graduate from high school? And, no one ever talked to him about these things. And he said, well, I'm not sure. A lot of 17-year-olds don't know what they want to do. That's pretty normal. And she said, well, maybe you could become a mechanic. Mexicans make good mechanics. Although my dad could do some things, he was not mechanical, right? That was not his thing. So he saw the writing on the wall, 67, 68. Vietnam War is pretty strong. And he thought, I'm Mexican, I'm poor, I've got no plans, I've got no silver spoon, right? I'm going to get drafted to go to Vietnam. So him and his cousin decided to take some sort of intelligence test to see if they could qualify for the Air Force. They both did well enough, and they're able to get into the Air Force. His cousin got stationed in Washington State, and my dad got sent to Vietnam anyway, right? And even though he was in the Air Force, he has plenty of stories of seeing a lot of action in mostly Thailand. Thailand was not part of the war, but that's how war works, I imagine, So he saw a lot of action as a military police officer and also guarding airplanes and things of that nature. Came back from Vietnam, and he had the GI Bill. Met my mom, they had me. Meanwhile, he's in school delivering bread for a local bakery, one of the big bakeries. And he went to study at North Harris Community College with the GI Bill, and he studied postal technology.
Nice.
Which, I don't know if that's a degree plan anymore, but he thought, hey, this is a federal job. I've already got some years under my belt. It'll come with, good pay, a uniform, which he liked, and it's respectable. It's an honorable job. People need their mail.
It sounds honorable, right?
It is, And he said, especially the neighborhood where I might work, people rely on their, this is the 70s. There's no email. There's nothing like. People rely on their checks. They rely on things that get to them, right?
Well, that's how things happened, right?
Yeah.
Like, people wrote letters back then.
Exactly. So, and packages, whatever. So he wound up working as a mailman for 20-something years, retired kind of early, which he said later on was a mistake. But, when I would see him in the streets, every now and then we'd see him, and, he always had his uniform pressed, take it to the cleaners. He wore typically black dress shoes to walk the streets of Houston, hot and humid, to deliver mail. But he always wanted to look good, right? He always wanted to look sharp. And so, he did look good. Now, my dad wasn't an alcoholic, but he was a binge drinker, right? And my parents were divorced, so, he'd have us on every other weekend, and we would go to cantinas, right? That's something that we did. We did other things as well. He was heavily involved in LULAC later in life, League of United Latin American Citizens, and we would do a lot of festivals where they would raise money for scholarships. But, sometimes, those events were happening. And so we would go on a Saturday, we would go to a cantina where he would play pool. And these aren't like the breweries of today where they got a menu, right? You got your drinks, and there was no food per se. They had these little bags of dried shrimp at the bar. Maybe we'd eat that. If we were lucky, somebody was having a fundraiser of some sort, and they would sell a plate, right? Barbecue, beans and rice. And my brother and I would get to enjoy that while he was drinking, maybe playing pool. He'd give us some quarters so we could, play pool. And that's kind of what we would do on weekends. And then Sunday we would go to church. But we also did a lot of fishing. Did a lot of, whether it's in town or we go to the coast, we seldom really would stay at home. We would go out. But, he definitely was a binge drinker, smoked as well. But with all those sort of childhood memories of being abandoned and not having a very stable home life, and then after Vietnam, my dad certainly had PTSD.
Yeah.
He had shrapnel in different parts of his body.
So when you say he saw action, if he had shrapnel, he was like on the line. Even though he was in the Air Force, you don't.
Yeah, he had stories that they would go patrol at night. They'd leave at night, and then they'd come back at 7 a.m. And he said they go straight to the bar, and the bar would have shots lined up. And as soon as they get there, they start drinking, and the band would start playing.
Yeah.
Like that was their morning because they're celebrating getting through another night.
Wow.
But he had shrapnel, and there's plenty of stories of things. My dad was kind of crazy,
Sure,
but in a good way, I think, but also literally kind of crazy. And so one time in Houston, years later, he's in his 60s by now, and there was some road rage, and my dad, it's Texas, it's Houston. He had a gun in his vehicle, and some guy pulled out his gun and kind of flashed it. My dad pulled out his gun and flashed it. Later on, my dad went to some place, and he got not pulled over, but the officer found him, and he said, "Hey, were you the guy that was flashing the gun?" And he was like, and then the officer asked my dad, he goes, "You ever shot anybody?" And I said, "Well, not lately." And he said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I was in Vietnam.
Yeah.
I shot a lot of people."
Wow.
So yeah, my dad, and there's other stories with guns.
Sure.
In fact, when we moved him out of his house, 72, 73, to get him into an adult facility, we had to, clear everything out, and I think we counted 14 guns.
Holy smokes.
All in different parts of the house.
Sure.
Just in case.
Yeah, you never know.
All calibers. And we took pictures of it. And it was kind of funny, but it's also like, hey, Dad, what are you doing with these guns? And these facilities where you move to, these adult facilities, older folks' homes, they don't allow guns.
Sure.
And, of course, he would keep some. And they found one, and luckily the guy was really cool about it because he was an ex-military. It was like a Uzi-type gun. And they said, hey, I brought it down. He called me, the manager. I brought it down. I've got it in my office. You need to come get it, But he was really cool about it. And I say, Dad, you can't keep that here.
Sure.
But I go, if you're going to do it, hide it better than just leave it on the bed. So he still had like a little pistol.
Yeah.
And he's on the fourth floor. Like, who do you think's going to come in here?
You never know. You never
You know,
know.
but
right?
that was his mentality. Like, yeah, exactly. You never know. So he had a lot of emotions. He was a very emotional person where he could be very happy, great storytelling, but he had a lot of emotional baggage.
Yeah.
And so when he would pick us up, and my brother doesn't remember this as much, he was younger, but he would get into these drag out emotional purges.
Yeah.
And I was just a kid, and I was kind of a hostage to that. I had no way to react to that. I just
How
kind
old
of
do you think were you at the time?
anywhere from like 7 to probably well into my teens.
Wow.
You know, where I had to kind of be his, I wouldn't say therapist because I did nothing for him,
Yeah.
but I was there and I had to listen to it.
Sounds like he was doing a little trauma dumping on you, maybe.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
He did. And he had a lot of that, and he didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Although, admittedly, back then PTSD wasn't even, I don't know if it was a thing or it wasn't acknowledged as a mental health issue for Vietnam vets, I would say.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Vietnam. It was a lot of other stuff.
Okay.
It was a lot of other stuff because he always told us he loved us a lot,
Yeah.
which is, you know, some kids never get told that. So I'm not complaining, but because he never heard it growing up
Yeah.
from a dad who was never there and a mom who was too busy working and trying to feed kids
Yeah.
and was stretched and stressed,
Right.
right? And sick. You name it, she had it. So I think that, you know, he was never shown love,
Right.
right? I mean, Christmases, no gifts. You know, he had to start working at an early age. So like your dad, my dad worked at an early age, but it's Houston, so there's no picking crops.
Yeah.
You find a job somewhere. And so probably when I think he told me he was 12, he was working at a restaurant near the Astrodome. He didn't live near the Astrodome. He had to take a bus from downtown Houston to get there. And so he was working as a busboy in this fancy seafood restaurant. And he said, these major stars would come through. We're talking, you know, early 60s.
Nice.
These stars would come through, maybe late 50s even. And they had money, and it was a lot of glamour. And he said, one time this lady said, hey, young man, will you come over here and will you get me a package of cigarettes? And he went, yes, ma'am. My dad was very formal. Taught us to say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, all the time. So when I moved to New Mexico, I was yes, sir, no, sir, all the time, everybody. Right. People were like, you don't have to sir me or ma'am me. So this lady, he went and got her the cigarettes, and I forget exactly how she put it, but she said, have you ever had two whatever, like clipped together? You know, it's like an expression of like two bills or something. And he's like, yes, ma'am. She says, well, here you go, son. And she put some money in his front shirt pocket. And then he went back to the kitchen, and one of the other busboys, who was a man, you know, an adult, said, hey, did you see what she gave you? He said, yeah, a couple of dollars. He goes, no, you need to look at it.
Yeah.
Because I guess he saw. He pulled it out, and it was $100 bill.
Nice.
I mean, he was 12 years old, so he was born in 48. So we're talking 1960, right? And he was like, wow, never had seen a $100 bill. Resh told him after work, you know, make sure that he wasn't going to get robbed or anything. 2-something in the morning, woke his mom up, and she woke up startled. What's wrong? Right? What happened? He's like, nothing, Mama. I want to show you something.
Right.
And he pulled out the $100 bill, and she started crying.
Yeah.
She's like, you have no idea how much we needed this. So she took the $100, gave him like 10, gave him 10 back, and said, but this is a down payment on those Stacey Adams you want.
Right.
He couldn't even get the whole shoe, right? Yeah. The shoes. Like, it was a reverse tithing. She took the 90, gave him back 10. No complaints.
Yeah.
Right? That was his job now as a 12-year-old young man.
Right.
But it's down payment on the Stacey Adams. And
but what does that say about your dad, right? Like he could have hit the $100, right? But
of course.
He went running home to show his mom and make her proud, right? Because he knew something was going on, right? He knew this was a significant amount of money, and she was really going to benefit from it, and she did, right? And she did what she needed to do. So kudos to your dad for doing that at 12. Come on.
Yeah. But I think that's the way our dads grew up.
Yeah.
That there's a bigger service, right? It can't be just about me.
Yeah.
Which is way different than today's generation.
Sure.
Now, not to say that there aren't good kids out there, hardworking kids, but I tell my daughters, and I told it in front of my stepdad one time, I said, y'all wouldn't have made it in their generation. I don't know if I would have made it.
I know I couldn't have made it.
I would have barely scraped by. Yeah. Maybe.
Right.
Maybe, by the grace of God. But I know y'all wouldn't have made it.
Right.
Because y'all are spoiled, and they didn't even get it.
They won't. Because they have no reference.
And my stepdad just he goes, yeah, they wouldn't have made it.
Not at all.
No. Right. Because he's got his own stories, right? But they just really worked. And like you said, they worked hard and played hard.
Yeah.
Right? Because my dad did play hard for sure.
Right.
But when he came to work, he was a jokester and funny and everybody's, best friend. Work was a serious thing. It was serious business, no matter what you did. And supporting your family, doing the right thing, working your butt off, that it boiled down to something as simple as that. Those are the things that you do.
Sure. I mean, and that goes back to that work ethic. It's something learned, I guess. You have to see it. It's easy to talk about it. It's easy saying, hey, I want this and I want that. But when the rubber hits the road and you have to put your butt on the line to bring home that $100, I know he didn't think he was going to make $100 that day in one tip. I mean, who does, right? That's even a lot of money nowadays. But those are the kind of things that form you as a person. He's 12 years old out there hustling. I couldn't see my daughter out there hustling. I wouldn't want that life for her.
No.
And same thing with my son. You mentioned something about he was going to be there for you because he never had that.
Right.
And so selfishly, I vicariously lived through my kids. So, like, for example, I would buy them all the toys that I always wanted that I never had. And even though they were probably too young when I would get them from, it was really secretly for me, right? It's like, here, but this is for you to unwrap, honey. You're 1 year old, but one day you'll understand how important it is to me and you, right? But that's the benefit. I could have seen my dad as an alcoholic, as a womanizer, whatever you want to call it, and use that as an easy cop out to just not be a good father or just not be a good dad. But I saw that all the drinking he did and all the stuff that he did, and I'm just like, well, I'm not going to do that, right? I like to drink just as much as anybody else. I went through my phases of college and all that stuff, and I still like to do a little bit of binge drinking on the weekends, but I knew when I had kids, I wasn't going to hide that I drank, but I wouldn't drink all the time. And so I would have a beer, I would have like a glass of wine, but I never, and you could ask my kids now, have you ever seen your dad like falling over drunk? Maybe when I turned 50, I drank a little too much, right? And my son did see me.
Well, it's a milestone.
It was a milestone, right? I was happy to be alive at 50. But it wasn't a common thing, and nor was it that I hung out with a bunch of guys that just did a bunch of drinking, and that was our way of life, or that was my way of coping. I just never did that. So I was very conscious of the drinking. I was always making sure that my kids knew that their dad wasn't a drunk, and I think that was really important for me. And then also that I was just around, period. And I was heavily involved, right? And heavily involved in their academics and their bedtimes and their bats and their just everything about being a father and raising little kids. So to me, that was always very important to be there. Again, it's a crapshoot. Either you do it right or you do it wrong, but you're just doing it. It's easy to just walk away and not do it, but being there and being in the trenches, when they're sick, when they're at their little performances, whether it's a game, whether it's a musical recital or something like that, you just have to be there,
Yeah, that's a great point. You don't have to do fatherhood, quote unquote, right.
There is no right.
It kind of reminds me of this expression that I heard one time listening to an NFL game, and they talk about, this lineman or this linebacker has this ability or can run this fast or has this technique. But as the game or the season goes on, players get injured.
Yeah.
And it's the next man up. And then one of the broadcasters, one of the announcers said, you know what the best ability is for these football players? Availability.
Sure.
Just being on the field.
Yeah.
Just being available, right? And I think that's more than half of it, right? Just being available, being there.
One instructor I had, he said 90% of success is being there.
Yeah.
Just being there.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you're the best. Doesn't mean you're freaking, you're going to split the atom, but you were there. You
Right.
were available, and people knew about you.
Yeah. Now, I think one of the things that we have to our advantage is that because of our education, on top of our hard work and the connections, the networks that we've built, we've got good jobs, right? So we've got some disposable income that allows us to be there. But our dads didn't always have that.
Not at all.
And you mentioned the word hustle or hustling. What'd your dad do as a side hustle to have this little extra income on the side?
Yeah. So I already mentioned the upholstery, right? I don't know where he learned that skill, but it's a skill, and he has a beautiful, heavy-duty industrial sewing machine.
Wow.
And he had the big giant scissors that were made for upholstery, and so kudos to him on how he did that. And I saw him upholster vehicles, cars, chairs, couches, all that stuff, and even repair stuff like that. So that was one side hustle for my dad. The other one, which those who know my dad know him as a pool shark, and he was like a legitimate pool shark. When I was about 12, he took me one time to Clicks. It's a billiards hall here in El Paso, and it's actually a nice place, right? And so he takes me, I don't know why, because he would hardly ever take me anywhere. So he takes me to Clicks, and it was like on a Tuesday night. And so we go to Clicks. They had a tournament there that he was going to be part of. And so I'm sitting there, and then he gets us a table, and then this young couple, this really good-looking guy with this really pretty girl, this guy opens up this beautiful case, and inside of it, he has this beautiful pool stick. And so then my dad plays him, and my dad just absolutely schools him, right? And the guy is just so humbled, but he realizes how good my dad is. And so then he starts a friendship with my dad, and so my dad ends up like giving him lessons like the entire night. And so then he ends up comping our table. He buys us snacks and whatnot just because he was so good. One of the other vivid memories I have of my dad being a pool shark is, so my dad wasn't around much. And so on the occasion that my dad did really well while he was out at whatever cantina, hustling some players out there, he'd come home and he'd wake my mom up and he'd be like, hey, get the kids up, we're going to go out for burgers. And there I am, I don't know how old, 7, 8 years old, and he's getting us up out of bed. We're going to the hamburger hut on Alameda and Copia, and we're getting menudos and hamburgers for me, my siblings, at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And so it's burgers, here's a pocket full of quarters, go play video games.
This is at 2 a.m.?
3 a.m.
3
right?
a.m.
Yeah, 3 a.m. on Alameda, right? Not the safest neighborhood.
They wake you up and said, hey.
And my mom was so happy, right? She was just so happy. And I think in her eyes, it was like, hey, if this is what the best is that he's going to offer to spend time with me and the kids, then I'm going to take it. And her attitude was like, let's go, right?
I think that's really smart because and I'm not condoning anything.
Right.
I'm just saying she could have said, what the hell are you doing waking us up at 2 a.m.?
Exactly.
Like, who do you think you are?
Right.
Now, that'd be hard to imagine these days, but she said, just like you said, like, hey, he's bringing home money.
Yeah.
And he's bringing home the bacon. Let's go out and celebrate.
We're going to celebrate at 3 o'clock in the morning with a bunch of kids. And I remember the giant bowl of menudo my dad would have right in front of him. My mom sitting by his side, and me and my siblings are just kind of running around that place, having a good time, right? I was happy. We were playing video games. I could sleep another time. Who cares about sleep? I'm getting a hamburger, like a big hamburger, right, with everything on it. And my dad's cool. My mom's happy. And that's just kind of a crazy memory because we only did that because my dad was able to pull his winnings from that night. I don't know how much he won or what it was, but it was enough to take all of us out to dinner or hamburgers at the Hamburger Hut, Hamburger Inn, whatever it's called, at 3:00 in the morning. So those are some of the coolest memories where it was like, what the hell are we doing, right? Like I would never do that with my kids, but I do tell my kids about those stories, and I do tell them like I have taken them out to like IHOP and we'll go have like hot chocolate or something real late at night. But that's just us, right? Anyways, those are kind of stories that are unique, but it was the lifestyle that my dad had. You know, pool shark. He had a good night. I don't know how much money he won, but he came home and took the family out for some burgers.
Yeah, those are really great stories. And so although our dads, I didn't meet your dad, but I can tell, there's some rough memories there. But I think that we also remember the positive, whatever that was, right? We just remember these other positive memories that we get from them. So my dad loved to play pool too. He was actually, I don't think he was to the degree of your dad at Pool Shark, but we definitely he won some times and, hey, let's go to the movies, right?
Okay.
But he was good at all those sorts of manly games, right? Whatever you want to call that, dominoes, cards, joke telling with women, right? He just exhumed these qualities that as a kid I just sort of soaked up, and I was like, wow, Now he was an alcoholic, but in a way I was proud of his drinking, right? It's like,
really?
Well, it was weird because we'd be somewhere and, hey, did you see Dad? My brother and I would be counting. He drank 14 beers.
Holy smokes! Really? You counted them?
Oh yeah, we'd count. You're like, wow, that's pretty cool. To us, that was cool. Like, Dad drank 14 beers, right? Yeah. Let's go home. Driving home, right? Which is not a good thing.
No.
But as a kid, you kind of admired your dad. Yeah. Even in the bad stuff, you admired him. Taking your kids to cantinas where there's no food, right. No kid zone, obviously, no place where the kids should be, but that was just part of our life.
Yeah. Well, things were different back then, too, right? We're the same age, so you're talking the 70s.
Oh, yeah, 70s, or 80s even.
I can't think of taking I could take my daughter to an Applebee's and have a beer there, but
right.
Like to a straight-up bar where that's all it is, a pool table, a dartboard, and just a bunch of adults drinking, like, no.
And mostly men, right?
And mostly men, correct.
Right, yeah. I agree. I don't take my daughters places where I'm just going to drink. That's not going to happen. We're going to go somewhere where there's some food and it's a family-type atmosphere. But I think the thing my dad was best at was storytelling.
Yeah.
I like to think I come from a family of storytellers. He was a great storyteller. His mom was good, but his grandmother, my great-grandmother, was a wonderful storyteller. And stories were a way of teaching us something, right? It wasn't just to entertain. There was a moral behind it. There was a lesson behind it. And his stories were a way to teach me and test me. He was always testing me. Okay. And as the older son...
How would he test you?
Well, so as the older son, I always wanted to please him, show him how smart I thought I was. And so, for example, when I first started driving, and we were on I-45, one of the major arteries going north to south through downtown Houston. I was driving his 70-something Chevy pickup, the steering wheel the size of a pizza. I had a lot of give going 5 degrees left, 5 degrees right, and you still stay in your lane.
No power steering.
Yeah, and so I'm driving, and I'm getting nervous because he's looking at me, and there's a car in front of me, car behind me, and then there's an 18-wheeler that gets to my side, and he can tell, right?
Yeah.
But there's no like, oh, you can do it, son. It's none of that. So he asked me, okay, you got this car in front of you and there's traffic, whatever. Who are you going to pay attention to? The car in front of you or the car in front of that car?
Right.
Which makes no sense.
Yeah.
And I started to think about it. I was like, okay, I know this is a trick question. If I say the car in front of that car, not the car right in front of me, but the car in front of that car, he's going to say, you're wrong. Stupid. Yeah. Not just right, you're stupid. You're going to hit the car in front of you. Why would you look at that car? Yeah. So I thought, no, I'm going to go for the safe bet, the car in front of me, because that's the car I'm going to hit. So I said, the car in front of me.
Right.
He's like, no, you got to watch out for the car in front of that car, because the car in front of that car is the one that's going to stop. And then this car in front of you is going to stop. You need to keep your eye on that one. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. There was no arguing.
No, you're not going to argue
No,
with that.
there's nothing. I couldn't do anything.
If you want to lose, you're going to argue.
So on another occasion, driving same freeway on the feeder, and we're about to pass up a cemetery.
Yeah.
We're driving kind of slow. He's driving. I'm in the passenger seat, front passenger seat. And he turns over and he said, Mijo, my son, right? Mijo, how many people do you think are dead in that cemetery? I didn't bat an eye. I didn't think, well, that's a stupid question. Like, how am I? No, I'm over here trying to figure it out.
Right.
I'm looking to my right. I'm counting the number of columns, multiplying it by the number of rows I think there are. Yeah. Add another 15 or 20 for good measure. And I blurt out like 448, like as if there's an answer and he knows it.
Sure.
And he just turns and he's like, no, all of them. They're all dead. I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. But then he turns around and he goes, but how many of them do you think actually lived?
Yeah.
He said, can you imagine how many dead dreams and goals and aspirations that are buried there with people who were either too scared to do it
right.
or just ran out of time? And it always stuck with me, right?
Sure.
Because I felt like many times he wasn't quite happy with his life, but he did the best with the hand that he was dealt.
Yeah.
But he wanted to teach me, and he never quite said, do this, do that, or he didn't even say, let me look at your report card. Not that he wasn't concerned. Storytelling was his method, and it stuck with me. It resonated, and I always remember these stories, right, of my dad trying to teach me something and me trying to show him that I was a good son.
But there was a big message in him asking you about how many people lived, right? That's his way of telling you, hey, go after whatever it is you want to do, right? And not so many words, but that's what and it resonated with you because that happened when you were probably, a teenager or something like that. And here you are in your 50s still talking about that one conversation.
Yeah. So your dad lived to 89.
89.
Mine, 75.
Yeah.
I think he should have lived longer, but diabetes and other things, and he just didn't quite take care of himself. And I didn't live in Houston, and there's a lot of factors there.
Sure.
But what year did your dad pass away?
2017.
Okay. So we're talking like 8 years now.
8 years.
Yeah, mine was 23. What do you miss about your dad? What do you think about still?
Man, so that's a loaded question for me. So the death of a parent is always like traumatic, right? And it's hard to explain to anybody about that until you kind of go through it, and then you're like, wow, that's what it was. My dad's death was traumatic for me, but who I miss the most is my mom. And I hate to say it like that, but when I go to the cemetery to visit them, I visit my mom, even though they're in the same plot. And so I feel bad about that because I'm like, I don't miss my dad a whole lot, and I feel like an asshole for saying that. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the way it is. I miss my mom tremendously. But this show is talking about her dads. So my dad didn't really give like a lot of good consejos, right? Like a lot of good counseling. He did enjoy life. One of the big things that we would do is I had to be really careful if I invited him to go eat, because then he wouldn't eat all day, and he would be waiting for me to take him to go eat. And so I would just kind of spring it to him like a couple of hours beforehand, because if I told him, hey, tomorrow we're going to go eat, then he's calling me at 1, 2, 3, right? Hey, what time are we going to go have dinner? It's like, dinner's at 6 o'clock, you know. But he loved to eat, and he really, if anything, enjoyed food, right? It didn't even have to be a fancy restaurant. It just had to be a good Subway sandwich, a good steak, a good pasta.
Bola menudo.
A menudo, you name it. And he had he didn't like Vietnamese food very much. I found that out. He didn't like Oriental food very much, but that's okay, right? But I wanted him to just try different things. One of his favorite places was Golden Corral. And one day I just told my Dad, like, I'll take you anywhere you want, but I'm not going to take you to Golden Corral anymore. And I like broke his heart, right? And I didn't take him for years. And then he's like, well, let's go. He would call it El Corralito, right? He's like, vamos al Corralito, because it was all you can eat, right? My dad was all about the quantity, right?
Okay.
Not the quality.
It was a lot for your money.
It was a lot, right? And we would spend 2-3 hours there and just sit down, and he would just eat away, right? And I just couldn't do that food anymore, right? And I was like, Dad, I'm going to take you wherever, but we're not going to go there. And then one day for my birthday, I and this is just the way it was, right? No resentment whatsoever. Once I was a professional and working, I would just enjoy taking them out to eat. And so then one day for my birthday, I told my dad, hey, let's go out to eat. And I tell him, but we're going to go to Golden Corral. And he had this look like it was his birthday, right? Like, what? Like, really? After, like, not taking him, after denying him for, like, 10 years, I was like, let's go eat corralito. And he's like, and he was like a little kid, man. He got his little jacket, and he was like, let's go, man. And we went, and, man, my dad just keep it coming, right? Just come on, you know. So I got a lot of enjoyment out of watching them enjoy life.
Yeah.
Because they worked hard, right? They worked hard their whole lives. And so to get a meal handed to them, all you can eat, whatever kind of seasonings, whatever kind of dish, whatever kind of waitstaff.
Endless shrimp.
You name it, man. He was just like on it, bro.
Right.
And not to make him sound cheap, but if he knew a free meal was coming, he would enjoy it all the more, right? It was just like, hell yeah, just keep it coming, you know?
Right.
So that to me, it was like kind of payback a little bit.
Yeah.
Just, hey, it's a little reward. You know, you worked your ass off. You've gone through shit. You raised 7, 8 kids, bunch of grandkids, had a house, you know, went through all of trials and tribulations, migrated over here. Let's just go have a meal.
Yeah.
But he never took it for granted. Never, ever. It was always enjoyed, always thanked, and always super appreciated, you know. So that to me, if anything, it spoke highly of my dad, at least to be able to enjoy just the little things that everybody else takes for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my dad and I would always go out to eat too. It wasn't Golden Corral. We would go to a place in Houston called Luby's. So it wasn't all you can eat, but it was a Southern style cafeteria where you pick what you want. I don't know why, and this is kind of strange to me. It deserves some research, but even when I go with my mom, it was liver and onions. Out of all the things you could get there, they loved to get liver and onions. Wow. And I think there's something about childhood, you know, you reminisce or you have these memories, because liver is a cheap cut of meat, super cheap. It's an organ, but it's got a lot of iron. You know, it's going to sustain you, I suppose. And the onions is just a filler and for flavoring. Yeah. Liver and onions, and they pile it on because not everybody gets it, and it's cheap, right? And you would love to get the liver and onions, and that was always nice to go sit at Luby's with them because you could take your time. It's a big place, you know. And the ladies would come by and, you know, refill your tea and that sort of thing. But, you know, definitely the best memories I have with my dad and my brother is fishing. Yeah. My dad loved to fish. In fact, you know, there were times where he probably fished every day, especially after he retired. And he had a ton of fishing rods. He had a little storage unit packed with fishing gear, most of it messed up and unusable. But we would, you know, he would fish in the little bayous and creeks around Houston, ponds he would find. But I love to go fishing on the coast, you know, saltwater fishing. And so, you know, there's a whole experience with that of, you know, getting the gear, putting it in the back of the truck, driving out to the coast, having your windows rolled down. You start to smell the salt water in the air. You start to see little bodies of water popping up. You know you're getting close. Stopping over at, you know, one of the bait shops you would normally go to, seeing what they got in the bait section, you know, live shrimp or whatever, squid, because we didn't have the equipment. You know, we weren't rich by any means, so it was always frozen shrimp, frozen squid. Go out there and just have a good time, you know, fish, talk. You know, that was kind of a way, because he was always kind of prodding me to open up to him about different things in life, and I was so reserved because he was always prodding me that I kind of clammed up a lot, especially with all those emotional situations we had where I just learned to just be quiet. But with fishing, and you're there for hours, half a day, whatever, you know, I start to open up a little bit and feel more relaxed, and we would talk, and, you know, you just cast a line. Sometimes you don't even catch anything or anything worth keeping. Right. And we did these little contests, first fish, biggest fish. And it was just, a lot of great memories because
Was it you and your brother?
most of the time,
Yeah.
most of the time. But both my brother and I moved away.
Yeah.
It's not typical in Mexican-American households, but he moved to D.C., I moved to Albuquerque, then Las Cruces. So sometimes it was, just me and him
Right.
because my brother wasn't there, or vice versa. I wasn't there, my brother was there. But just those memories of, you'd have a cast net and he loved to cast it out. Even months before he passed away, of a number of things, but, his heart gave out. He was still throwing that cast line,
Yeah.
and just that I can see him, I can see him walking, I can see him casting, making jokes. There was just a lot of great memories of fishing there, and it's one of the things I write about. We've talked about is, and we just said earlier, you don't have to be a perfect dad. You don't have to get it right. You just got to be there. As you mentioned, episode 1, you coached baseball.
Yep.
Right? Little League. And my dad just took us fishing, right? He didn't know much about baseball, but just put a rod in your kid's hand and just teach him how to cast, bait it, cast, reel it in. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And you just have to be there.
Well, there's a lot of peace, with fishing. There's something romantic or peaceful, or however you want to look at it, because you're there with nature. You got the sun on you. You got a rod, and it's you versus nature, right? And it doesn't matter if you walk away with no fish. A good day fishing it beats any day at work. You know? Or a bad day fishing beats any day at work.
Yeah. When we had a celebration of life and we had a big cake and it said "Gone Fishing."
Sure.
And in fact, I've got something in my truck that says "Gone Fishing," and it was his, and I keep it in my truck to remind me. But one of the things, and so I visit my dad he's buried by himself at the VA cemetery in Houston, Texas, and so it's easy to find. His plot's easy to find because it's in a new section that they started developing in a corner.
Right.
And I go and there's parking there, and I park and I walk over. I find them because it's a maze, right? And because they're all next to each other.
Yeah.
In the VA, and I find his plot, clean it up a little bit, and just kind of give him a quick rundown of my life.
Yeah.
And so that's the tough thing, because when I lost my dad, I lost my father, I lost my best friend, and I lost my fishing buddy. So it was a tough loss, but I had him for 51 years.
Yeah.
And that was a huge blessing. And he kept true to his word. When I was born, he said, "I'm going to be a dad. I'm never going to abandon you." And he never did. Hey, vatos. We appreciate you. And remember, pónganse trucha.